Okay, friends, we are rounding out this week. Today, we're going to look at the story that is at the end of chapter 8, and then we'll look at the last verse of our reading for this week, which is chapter 9, verse 13. We're going to start with a pretty light topic of demon possession. Okay, if you have already read this part, you probably got a lot of questions. I won't be able to answer all of them, but we'll hit some pretty important stuff here that I hope will be helpful to you in making sense of some of these things, and in helping just make sense of kind of what do I do in response to this? What does this mean for us today? So let's look at chapter 8, beginning in verse 28. And when he came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men met him, coming out of the tombs, so fierce that no one could pass that way. So we talked last time that I was with you about the other side of the lake, and I showed you that picture. Here, they're there in a non-Jewish area, and when they get there, they meet these 2 men who are demon-possessed. And behold, they cried out, "What have you to do with us, O Son of God?" So these demons recognize Jesus for who he is, even though others haven't yet. Have you come here to torment us before the time? So they know something about some timing where at some point there will be like a judgment for what they're doing. But in their mind, the time hasn't come yet. Okay, so they're like, what are you doing here? Now a herd of many pigs was feeding at some distance from them. The demons begged him, saying, "If you cast us out, if you free these 2 men from us, send us away into the herd of pigs." So one of the reasons that we know that this is not a Jewish area, there's a herd of pigs. Jews don't eat pork. Okay, and he said to them, "Go." So they came out, the demons did, and went into the pigs. And behold, the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea of Galilee, into the lake, and drowned in the waters. The herdsmen fled, and going into the city, they told everything, especially what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they begged him to leave their region. There's a lot here. So many different directions that we could go. Things that I've got clarity around, things that I don't have clarity around, so many different directions. But let's just hit some top level stuff. What's one of the things that we see here? We, in our 21st century Western context, do not think frequently about the reality of the spiritual realm. We think about things that we see, taste, touch, feel, hear, physical things. What the Bible teaches, what those who are writing it believe, what Jesus certainly believes, is that along with the physical world, which is a very real world, obviously, there's also a very real but different spiritual reality. Things that we can't see, taste, touch, feel, hear. Things that can't be explained through the scientific method. We talked earlier this week about how sometimes we see things that medical science can't explain. A big question for us is, do we have our minds open to the possibility there is more to this world beyond just the physical? Do we believe that there's a spiritual component, a spiritual world, spiritual realm also? And certainly that's what Jesus believed. It's certainly what I believe. I believe that there are forces at play beyond what we can see, taste, touch, feel, and hear. So I think one is that I think this pushes us to take more seriously something that everyone in the ancient world took seriously, and that is the possibility of the reality of like a a greater beyond. Okay, so that's one. Two, when we think about that greater beyond, that spiritual world, we tend to think about our positive things, God, angels, things like that. Okay, but what Jesus certainly believes and what he's interacting with here is that there are forces in that spiritual realm that will evil also. Now, here's something that's really important. Those forces, nowhere in the scripture are seen to have any kind of ultimate authority or ultimate power. They are things that ultimately will be brought underneath the foot of God also, that will be cast out or made right, that they do not have ultimate authority over anything, including our lives. So we're talking about demons. Don't spend your time thinking about like The Exorcist and things like this. Think about the way that there are perhaps spiritual forces, powers, however you want to think about it, that seek to influence you in negative ways. One of the brilliant recent thinkers on this is C.S. Lewis. If you want kind of a look, an entertaining look into the way that he sees this, read Screwtape Letters. In Screwtape Letters, you have a kind of a seasoned demon who is giving advice to a junior demon. This junior demon is trying to influence for ill this young boy. And one of the things that the senior demon says is, he says, here's a lie to tell this little boy. This little boy's mother has a certain tone of voice that she uses that for whatever reason drives the boy crazy. You need to convince the boy that she uses that tone of voice intentionally and seek to build animosity between this boy and his mother by using the lie that she uses that voice in order to kind of get under his skin and drive him crazy. It's those kind of voices in our lives that seek to push us to pursue things that are selfish, or things that are just a waste of time. It's that nudging in our life towards those things that we know ultimately are not good for us or for other people. It's those things that push us away from the love of God and the love of others. I think it's time for many of us to open up our eyes to the reality of the spiritual world, both the ultimate reality of it, which is God and Jesus, the ultimate reality that we are rooted in, to open ourselves up to that, but also to open ourselves up to the reality that there are forces that seek to push us towards the ill, and they ultimately can't make us do anything. The idea that the devil made me do it is not legit, but the devil influenced me? Yep. The devil tempted me? For sure. But ultimately, I gave in. I think that that's something for us to see here. I think there's one more thing for us to see with this, and that is look at what happens at the end. Jesus has been working these kinds of exorcisms and these kinds of healings in this other region of Galilee, and people have been flocking to Jesus. What happens here? These men are healed, and the city folk want Jesus and his disciples to leave. And this prefigures some things that are coming. We'll see is that there are those that flock to Jesus because of his good work. And there are those that flee from him because of his good work. There are those that love him for it, and there are those that hate him for it. There are those that ultimately call him Lord and seek to make him king. And there are those that it will call him a blasphemer, that will ultimately hang him on the cross. We see that the work that Jesus does in this world, it's polarizing. And when we seek to do Jesus' work in the world, why would we expect anything less? We too will be polarizing. There'll be people who love us for it. There'll be people who hate us for it. There'll be people who are drawn to us because of it. And there will be people who will push us away because of it. It's just part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. is that just as he was polarizing, that when we walk in the way of Jesus, there will be those that love us for it and those that hate us for it. Let's go to the very end real quickly. The last story for this week is the calling of Matthew. And Matthew was a tax collector, someone who was not liked by those in society for reasons that we won't go into today. He was considered to be a tax collector, would have been considered to be a deeply sinful person. People are confused why it is that Jesus would call him to be a disciple and why it is that he spends time with tax collectors and other sinners. And he says this, "Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. For I have come not to call the righteous, but sinners." I'm not here for the people who've got it all figured out. Now, parenthetically, nobody's got it all figured out, right? I've not come to call the people that are already thinking that they've got it all figured out. No. I've come for people that are all messed up, that aren't living right. I come, he says at another point, I've come not for the healthy, but for the sick. Look, I've come for the least of these. Now, look, as soon as you turn it around and recognize that you too are a sinner and not righteous in the way that you think, then you're in too. But for those that think they've all got it figured out, it's going to be hard for them to hear my message. I've come for those people who recognize that they need something deeper, who recognize that there aren't just physical voids in their life, but in this spiritual reality that they have spiritual voids in their life. I've come to heal them. I've come to walk with them and to teach them. I've come to call not the righteous, those who think they have it figured out, but the sinners. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And that leads right into the conversation that we'll read next week around fasting. He says, look, we're not going to be obsessed with all of these practices as if they themselves are the point. But the practices, the fasting and the prayer and the sacrifice, they're so important, not in and of themselves, but because they point towards something larger. They point towards here the larger principle of mercy, of love. Ultimately, what they point towards is who God called Father, who Jesus calls Father, who we call God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They point towards him. So as we wrap up this week, what we're seeing is Jesus practicing what he preaches, healing, loving, connecting with people that other people would have left aside. Some people love him for it, and some people hate him for it. And if we're going to be followers of him, then we step into that also, practicing what he preaches and expecting some people to love us for it, and some people not to. God bless you, friends, and we'll talk again next week.